Well, everyone, welcome to the Tech Town Square. Eddie, what's
Hello.
happening?
Here we are. Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back again for another epic episode. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, comrades, in honor of our guest from last week. So last week, we had Jack Barsky, former KGB spy who saw the light and defected to the United States in the 1980s. So given that Jack's espionage career happened before the birth of the internet, we had this incredible conversation about what he called active measures, right? We would know it today as disinformation campaigns that the Russians were engaged in for the last 60, 70 years, and certainly before that, until now. Active measures is that term that he used over and over again. And I said, yeah, can we have some examples, Jack? This was incredible. So one of the active measures that they worked on was convincing Americans that J. Edgar Hoover was a crossdresser. And it's like, really? Why? Well, to sow distrust into the seed and kind of heart of the American people for their law enforcement. So we're going to be talking more about that today on the show. Welcome to everybody. And what's next, James? Should we go through a few house cleaning items or house rules first?
Yes. So first of all, everyone watching us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever else we're on right now, a few things. One, please make sure to subscribe. It is RSA week, so ton of content that we're posting this week around cyber, but this show's around technology, so you guys can check that out. All opinions on the show are our own and don't reflect any organization. Please keep that in mind as you watch the show, that this show is all about conversation. So in your comments and everything else, please be respectful and mindful, and you know, we want to encourage conversation. So that's really part of our show. And Eddie, you nailed it perfectly there a second ago. You know, active disinformation, deception by technology, or technological deception, as we called it.
Well, that's right. So James and I were chatting about that this week. Given that back in the day when Jack Barsky was doing these misinformation campaigns, the active measures, they were using newspaper ads. They were taking little kernels of truth and spinning stories around them. Today, this can all be done through keystrokes. Right? What Jack had to do back in the day was find a reporter that wasn't maybe that reputable, because back in those days, reporting was a real thing and they had facts, right? Today, of course, you have anybody with a blog can have an opinion. And so they don't have the same barriers to entry to engage in active measure conversations and in deceiving the American public as they did back in the past. And it's truly amazing to me. What's that Mark Twain quote? I put it out on my LinkedIn. A lie can get halfway around the world before the truth puts its pants on, something like that.
Well, we're seeing that now a lot, and it's very, very, it's happening all the time right now. We see that. To me, it's what's really interesting about this whole thing, Eddie, is how technology is being used to really influence the minds of people. And right now it's being done through social media. And one of the things that we've come to almost, I want to say, expect is that information is predominantly non-factual, right? A lot of people you speak with who are reasonable will tell you, my information isn't factual. I don't trust these sources, or I don't trust this. So now technology, this awesome feature, think of the internet 20 years ago when it was first invented. We saw a new world. Think of the internet 10 years ago. We saw a completely new world. And now we're 10 years later, 2021, right? 2021, we have a internet that's in every corner of the earth. We have speeds of internet that are unfathomable, right? I mean, I'm able to upload a YouTube video in 5 minutes.
Right.
Like, that's crazy. That's, you know, like, these are unspeakable things. And so,
and make them look like, I mean, you can spin any narrative you want to. And what blew me away when he spoke about J. Edgar Hoover was the fact that that lie is still believed. So now,
I mean, it was in the movie. You were saying it this week. Right. It was in the J. Edgar Hoover movie.
And that was Clint Eastwood, who tends to be kind of like a, you know, rah, let's get it right type of guy, right? And so he still believed it. And David, your comment here, you're absolutely right. Manipulation can now be done on a global scale. Whereas before, you had to put spies in the country. They had to have passports. They've got to be secret. They've got to speak the language, et cetera, et cetera. All of that's gone away. And I said to Jack, I said, look, I find it shocking how easy it is. It seems certainly easy for people to believe these kinds of narratives. And it's really had me thinking around the whole echo chamber, around how the algorithms have just worked themselves out to please us because of thumbs up everywhere, right? And so now what you have is you have essentially, if you have a lie within your echo chamber, but you're not looking outside of this echo chamber, how are you ever going to be corrected? And so I think there's a snowball effect of information, and now it's become a place where almost what is true, and here's another old Soviet proverb, when nothing is real, anything is possible. So if we don't know what is true, what do we have to stand on? Danielle's saying anyone can post a TikTok video. That's right, exactly. And it influences. That's an interesting word, isn't it?
So influencers to me is the modern model or spokesperson, right? So when you look at that, you look at it from a perspective of these, what they call social media influencers, the people trying to monetize a platform where we're the product. And there's a really good comment coming from David here, and I want to pull it up here in just a moment because, let me pull it up right now. And he goes, removing critical thinking from education plays a very large part in this. But the J. Edgar Hoover was at a time when we highly invested in our education. It was the boom of America, right? And it still worked. Right, people, we now know this was groundbreaking for us as a small up-and-coming show, right? This show, for all of you loyal people who watch and tune in, and take an hour out of your week to spend time with Eddie and I, we're grateful for it. And we're at the start of our journey. We've been doing this show for a little under 6 months. We're having a good time doing it. But we brought, I know Jack, and I was able to get Jack to come on my show. And Jack was, proactively telling me, James, I want to be on your show. I have a lot to bring. And I was like, all right, Jack, I want to bring you on. And I did. And for him to say that on our program, and Eddie and I, last week, Eddie and I got together. We actually were in person and not virtual. We sat at Cat's Deli over.
It was an amazing moment, wasn't it, mate? Yeah,
it was. We had a pastrami sandwich. We had a ton of pickles. And we sat and we hung out. And, we were reflecting on the moment of what we had with Jack and what he said on our show. And that's really why we're talking about technological deception today and the idea of critical thinking and education and beyond just TikTok video, guys. This goes beyond, this goes to the idea and the concept of I have technology at my hands. And this technology now is it's almost similar to driving a car. You have to get a driver's license to drive your car because a car is considered a weapon. If you run someone over, it's called vehicular homicide, right? Using your car to create homicide. And on the internet, we're seeing that more and more. I mean, what's going on right now with Chrissy Teigen and the stuff that's coming out over just the stuff that she's been saying to people, telling teens to commit suicide, trolling people, trying to cancel people, using her power for evil. And kind of what's happening with her. That to me is what's happening in technology today and how technology has now become a powerful machine that, do we need a driver's license maybe to use the internet?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? And to Danielle's comments on anyone can post a TikTok video, you see, what the internet has done is it broke up the monopoly that a few people and companies had on information. That's a good thing. So good, that's progress. 2 steps forward. Here's the 1 step back. Anybody can make a TikTok video. So now what you have is you're drowning in information. So in the early days, right, you had media companies that controlled the flow of information. You had scientists and academics, right, that were essentially, I'm a scientist, I'm an academic, so I get a platform and I get a voice. And it's difficult to get a platform and a voice prior to internet, so you had to go to the big media companies to get on TV or the radio. Fine. Those big media companies pretty much hired the expert at the time. Today, everybody's an expert. Today, it's anyone, it's all clickbait. And the machine has sort of morphed itself into an entertainment vehicle. And that's where critical information is being broken down because it's not all entertainment. So Paul, let's get to some comments. And we are back to Harmonic synchronization. James, do you know what harmonic synchronization is?
I don't.
Okay, Paul, jump in and tell us. Echo chambers, exactly. That's right. Tell us what harmonic synchronization is, because that would be very interesting. They help you believe what you want to believe, whether it's true or not. Okay,
Yeah,
so that's harmonic
we
synchronization,
see,
like an echo chamber.
we see that with media today. David brings up a great comment here. He goes, Yuri Bezmenov gave America a warning about the silent war decades ago. So I actually Googled Yuri Bezmenov. The name sounded familiar. I wanted to make sure I brought up the right facts, so I have it across from me. Yuri Bezmenov was a KGB agent, very similar to our good friend Jack. And he actually defected and went to Canada. He was in charge of creating a Soviet sphere of influence in India when he defected. And he really kind of went off and went to Canada, got asylum by Canada, and Justin Trudeau's dad granted him the asylum. He moved to LA in the 80s. In 83, at a lecture, he expressed that he wouldn't be surprised if the Soviet Union had shot down Korean Air Flight 007 in order to kill Larry McDonald, an anti-communist Democratic member of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, that's quite the statement. That's quite the accusation, right? You know, that actually brings up an interesting point, David, because it's oftentimes surprising to me, you know, how far governments will go to get things done. And in actual fact, though, when you start peeling back the layers, and I think this is what the public needs to understand in general, maybe not this audience here. This audience is typically a well-educated audience. They're engaged, right? But the general public, I mean, put it this way. I remember talking to a lady, sweet enough lady, but it's just like, please don't vote. So this lady who was a European, and I was talking to her about when the jihadist extremists beheaded the Charlie Hebdo and murdered the cartoonists at the Charlie Hebdo newspaper magazine for drawing pictures of Allah, right? Cartoon pictures. And she said, well, we just shouldn't draw them then people won't be upset. And I said, well, here's the thing though. You're saying it's just cartoons. Today it's just cartoons. Tomorrow, what is it? So if we kowtow to these people, what is it the next day? And how far are governments willing to go? And I think that people just don't generally understand how far governments are supposed to go or willing to go. Take the Uyghur Muslims in China. These are concentration camps, and we should be calling them that, right? This is not a detention facility. This is not a re-education facility. These are concentration camps. And innocent people are being locked up because they look like an Uyghur Muslim, because camera technology, this is camera technology that we across the world invest in these companies to create this amazing technology. And there's an ethical dilemma here. This technology, these cameras are so amazing, they can pick an Uyghur Muslim out from a crowd. And then somebody from the Chinese Communist Party will grab that person, and then no trial, straight to the camp. And then so people need to understand the visceral, the really human aspect of that you, particularly you, could be grabbed and just thrown into a camp with no trial. It's such a foreign thought to Westerners, and especially, I think, those of us living in the freedom of this.
Yeah, I mean, we see that when we look at what you're talking about. You really hit the nail on the head, and you actually, I don't know if you stole my talking points for today's episode.
We met last Friday. Of course I did.
Because I wanted to bring up the idea of, I wanted to bring up the concept of biometrics. Now, we're getting a bunch of comments, and for whatever reason, they're not showing up here, but they're showing up here. So I can't bring them on screen.
Okay, I'll go live on LinkedIn too and have a look just in case too, buddy. So let's, we'll tag team.
So I want to bring up Paul, who said, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. And then he goes, harmonic synchronization is my term for everybody going to their own corner and yelling at each other, threatening to rip society apart. Okay, that's a really good concept, Paul. I actually agree with that. And then Nathan Greenspan says general public equals well-trained parakeets. Surrendering to the cancel culture will erode away your liberties to the point you no longer recognize your country. That's by David Moalim as well. So a few things. Let's first of all talk about what you brought up with the Uyghur Muslims. All right. So I'm a very big proponent of free Hong Kong. And my ringtone on my phone is take down the CCP. And I think you heard it when we were having lunch, right? Like I am truly a voice against the power of the CCP. I love the people of China. The people of China, the good people of China, are unbelievable people. The Chinese Communist Party is corrupting the Chinese culture it's uprooting decades of Chinese culture. It's uprooting it. It's changing it. It's eliminating the heritage. It's deciding what part of history fits and what part of history gets eliminated. Okay.
Right. And the relationships that we've forged over the years, it's wrenching them apart.
Correct. It's wrenching them apart. It's divide and conquer. If you want to talk about segregation, people, over the last week, people have been telling me that Israel's an apartheid state, and I'm not going to get into that on today's show, but, I tell them, really, you've been to Israel, Eddie, I've been to Israel. Arabs and Jews live side by side. An apartheid state is China. China puts Uyghur Muslims on the western part of China in their own province. The Buddhists are in their own province in China, and the different people are all in their own province. They have clear segregation. Right. Different classism is very real in China. But what you brought up to me is the biometric aspect of how technology is being utilized against the private citizen.
Right.
And if you travel to China, so they take your picture upon entry. When you get to customs, they have your picture when you get your visa to go to China. They then verify that, and now they've got your full facial DNA, but now they've also got the shape of your body. That's what a lot of people don't understand in China. Their biometrics, their full-scale camera measures a person's proportions. It also measures the health of an individual. There's a lot of different things that go on with the social credit system in China that's very, very disturbing for the traditional human being, especially for us as people. So when we see it like that, right, it creates to me a whole new set of challenges where technology is now being utilized in a way where it's deceiving people, and it's intentionally doing so. And biometrics to me is the greatest single threat to human liberty. Government being able to use your biometrics to track your every single movement is no different than what we see in the Minority Report movie with Tom Cruise.
Yeah, that's where we're getting. I'm looking at my phone here, so apologies, ladies and gentlemen. The LinkedIn comments are not coming up where you're seeing them, but we're seeing them on our mobile devices. So I just want to get to David's comment. David, thank you. Surrendering to the cancel culture will erode away your liberties to the point you no longer recognize your, and I can't see it on my phone from there. David, you're right about that. And what's interesting,
recognize your country.
Thank you. What's interesting about cancel culture today is this conversation that James and I are having about cameras, about technology that's being used against people. Cancel culture. So we need to understand this. What our enemies, and I'm talking about politicians, right? Again, we've got a caveat all the time. We love the people, we don't like the party, right? So what they've done is they're able to sow so much disinformation about, let's say, Asian hate, that if you even mention something about China plus negative, well, then you're racist. So the conversation can't take place. I mean, we should be talking about the Wuhan lab, but we can't talk about that, can we? Where coronavirus came from, because if we talk about that, and genuinely, there are some stupid people that will go out and beat up an Asian person, right? So unfortunately, that gets amplified in the conversation. We can't therefore talk about things like a lab virus outbreak and just talking about it, just to make sure this tragedy doesn't happen again, not a blame thing, right? And it's the same thing with the Uyghur Muslims, the same thing with the technology. And when the NBA even wants to do something, and I forget what it is they tweeted, it was one tweet, and they got threatened with cancellation, and they had to roll back on their position with China. So,
we have an issue with the comments coming from LinkedIn. All other comments from YouTube and Facebook are still coming in. So just so you guys know, it's not that we don't want to bring your comments up like we usually do. There's a technical difficulty here. I don't want to restart the stream because so many of you are on it right now between all three platforms.
Just keep commenting though, because we can see it. We'll read it.
We can see it, and we'll talk about it. Unfortunately, we can't bring it up to the screen. You guys this is the Tech Town Square, and this is one of the challenges of technology, is sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is coming from Shlomo Buckman. It says, it shouldn't surprise us because by being quiet, we give them legitimization.
Exactly.
That's kind of going to David's comment about cancel culture.
That's right. We not have to be quiet. We are quiet because of bloody cancel culture. And Nathan jumps in right here and says, how do you go against Chinese Communist Party when the NBA and Disney are dependent on China?
Not true. No. Disney lost $600 million last quarter.
But they're dependent on China, right? That's their biggest market.
It's not their biggest.
The biggest potential market. Right?
Here's the thing. So American corporations, I believe, sometimes are really blind to numbers, right? And they're looking at quantity, not quality, because everyone seems to think if I can go to China and sell everyone something in $1, I'm a billionaire.
Right.
Like I'm a billionaire, 1.3 billion people there. If every person in China gives me just $1, I'm a billionaire. So how do I do that? Disney's issue is the theater market in China is 3 times the size of the theater market in America. But here's something that happened during COVID. People stopped going to the movie theaters. Theaters are slowly opening back up again, but now the experience has got to be different because guess what? We've learned a new habit. We've learned that we can watch new films at the comfort of our home.
True. I think, who is it, Nathan? I think Nathan's comment is still accurate from the perspective that, like, look at that movie, Doctor Strange, right? There was supposed to be a Tibetan monk being one of the heroes, and China didn't like it, so they completely rewrote that character. It's in the comic books as a Tibetan monk, but they don't recognize Tibet, so screw that. It comes out of the narrative, and then Disney curtailed to the Chinese Communist Party. The NBA did the same thing. Nike has to do it. And look, I feel I am not ignorant to the plight of these companies. We started a thing 30, 40 years ago where we started making runners in China, right, and manufacturing all this clothing. And now, which is exactly what the Chinese Communist Party wanted, and now we have this dependency on them. So here's a perfect example. When it was time to talk about COVID, China had all the masks. And they said, hey, this whole lab leak conversation, that's going away if you want your masks. And they held the American populace to ransom because they produce all the stuff. Now, that came to light in 2020. Companies are already starting to look, where else can we manufacture these things? That's going to be a decades-long journey for companies to break up the monopoly that China has on manufacturing their stuff. But right now, yeah, the trade war is a challenging thing, and we should be having one, right? And we should be a little less dependent on them. All right.
I don't want to turn today's show into China. All right. We brought up China. I kind of want to shift back to the technological deception. I want to bring us back to what the real topic is. Sometimes we get carried away and we go down a rabbit hole. And I don't want us to go down this rabbit hole on today's show. I want us to really talk about this from a technological perspective, what I call technological deception. And part of that, folks, happened last week on Thursday night. I think one of the greatest military deception techniques done in modern history. Right?
I love it. This is a great
modern
story.
History. So Matt is here. Hey, Matt, we have an issue with bringing comments up, so I apologize, but thank you for being here, Matt. So I want to talk about this. So you guys see the Israeli flag right over my shoulder. Awesome. All right. So Israel is in ongoing conflict with a terrorist organization, Hamas. People will tell you this is about Jerusalem and all that other crap. No, it's not. Israel hasn't been in Gaza since 2005. If you guys don't know how to do math, that's about 16 years. They've still been getting rocket fire from Gaza for 16 years, even though there's not one Jew in Gaza and there's not one thing that's going on in Gaza. The whole thing with Sheikh Jarrah, and you hear this, and the Save Sheikh Jarrah and whatnot, is a dispute between essentially people who've been living in a house rent-free for over 50 years that they don't own it. And for 20 years, it's been going through the court system. These are squatters that took over a property that they don't own and are residing in it and are not paying rent. And they've been going through the court system for 20 years. 20 years. And the court ordered them to be evacuated because they haven't paid rent to the homeowners for 20 years. They've been living on their property. And it's not the whole neighborhood. It's 4 families that are squatters in one building in this neighborhood in Sheikh Jarrah. And so here we go. The Hamas starts firing missiles because of it. Because, anytime you get to, launch a missile for Hamas, They're empowered now. They got $150 million U.S. taxpayer dollars thanks to the Biden administration. Iran is back being a disruptor again because they're about to get their sanctions lifted off. And again, we're going to see what happens there. So they're empowered. They used Sheikh Jarrah as an example to launch missiles at Israel. And so here we go, right?
Yeah.
And Israel decided that they were going to run the ultimate trick on Hamas. So Israel went on Twitter and said the IDF on their own Twitter account posted Israeli ground troops and Air Force are now entering Gaza for attacks. And lo and behold, there it is. Hamas starts scrambling all their fighters. Hamas has an intricate system. Instead of, paying for healthcare and building schools and taking care of the 2 million people that reside in Gaza, they don't do that. They take all the money that they get and they invest it, and they've built something called Gaza Metro. Gaza Metro is an intricate system of tunnels that allows the movement of weapons and fighters underground in Gaza. So Israel had drones and satellites all focused on the Gaza Strip. They saw all the Hamas fighters start to go into their tunnels because guess what? They tweeted it. The media ran with it without verifying it. No one from mainstream media picks up the phone to the IDF spokesperson and says, hey, we saw this tweet. Does this mean you have ground troops at the moment in Gaza? Not one journalist did that.
That basically means from now onwards, we can look at all journalists and say Twitter is news to them.
Correct.
Right.
A blue check mark in Twitter, a statement by a blue check mark in Twitter is a fact.
Because we know that the Twitter army have already been out fact checking it themselves, right?
Right. So here we go. So they launch this thing, right? So they all the media's run with it. Washington Post. They had a tweet that said escalating tension in the Middle East. Israel invades Gaza. USA Today ran with it. Reuters ran with it. And what Israel did is on the border, they had brought up all the tanks, all the ammunition, and all the tanks were powering. So all the engines, and they started kicking up dust. And so it looked like they were getting ready to essentially take down the fence. And they started shooting mortars into the minefields that are on the border with Gaza to blow up the mines so that, the troops invasion. Yeah. Hamas's soldiers all ran into the tunnel, getting ready for what they consider to be urban guerrilla warfare. And then Israel launched the largest air offensive in modern history. 160 different aircrafts from Black Hawk and Chinook helicopters to unmanned drones to F-16, F-15s, F-35s, all in the air, bombarding Gaza and the underground tunnel system, including all entrances and exits, for 40 minutes straight, over 400 and some odd 50 missiles.
So Matt Lee, one of the comments here says, Israel did a great job misdirecting to ground attack when it was an air attack. Matt caught that one too, man. Well done, Matt. Yeah, exactly. David's saying Hamas is the puppet of Iran. Absolutely. In fact, even using Hamas in a proxy cyber war against Iran's enemies. That's how far they're going with that. Nathan's saying, glad to hear at least someone is talking truth on this. Thank you for your articulation there, James. Absolutely. I agree with you there, Nathan. And he continues to say, so much garbage in the news about the poor children in Gaza. Right. I know. This is all you see. Exactly. And then last comment that I'm seeing here, let me just refresh. Yeah, from David. Thank you, David. Israel has done an amazing job of survival, especially with all that is stacked up against them. I call it the greatest comeback story in human history, the Israeli people. Because if you think the 20th century was one of our bloodiest in human history for all the wars we had. And I cannot think of an atrocity against any one particular people group that was more severe than what the Jewish people went through in World War II. So now, what were Jewish people down to? Like a few million people left, not much. I forget what it was. At the end of
6 million people died in World War II.
So 6 World War II, but there were only a few million Jews left. So then 1948, they get sent to, the British
They
mandate.
don't get sent to. So the story is a little bit more complex than that. We don't have enough time on today's show to go through the story of Israel. But, but what I will say is that during World War II, during the beginning of World War II, during the beginning rise of the Nazi Party in Germany and everything thereafter, right? Jews started going back to their homeland, Israel. There was already a Jewish presence in Israel. There always was a Jewish presence in Israel, but the Jews didn't rule Israel. Israel was ruled by the Ottomans, then by the British, and before that, there was always part of some sort of empire, someone who ruled it. In post World War II in 1948, between the end of World War II and 1945 to 1948. In those 3 years, people were trying to find out what to do with Israel. And in fact, in Israel, the Jews were offered Uganda instead of Israel. They said, hey, listen, Israel's under a British mandate. How about you guys go to Uganda and Africa? It's a little bit bigger than Israel. And Jews were like, that's not our homeland.
Our home, man.
Yeah, that's not our home is in Africa. Our home is Israel. And then there was a partition plan that was proposed to the Arabs in 1947, which they unequivocally rejected, which then led to Israel declaring its independence in May of 1948. That was David Ben-Gurion. And then the 1948 Independence War.
So, and my point was from then to today, what a comeback story. What an incredible group of people using intellect, and that's all they had, no oil, intellect, to get a GDP of what, 390 billion now? So anyway, incredible in 70 years.
But that's the technological misdirect. They used Twitter to misdirect everything and get all the Hamas fighters into one location in the underground tunnel system, and then have that tunnel system collapse on top of them, essentially killing all those fighters. Now, Hamas says only about 13 or 30 fighters were in the tunnel. If you look at satellite imagery that's been released of the bombardment and of, the infrared of people going in, I mean, I counted 270 some odd people, and none of them came out.
Wow.
Not one.
Yeah, and they do a particularly good job. Let's see here. David's saying Israel has done an amazing job of survival, especially with all that. No, it wasn't that one. Actually, it was the one that's up here right now on Facebook from Paul. Israel, that's the one. Israel showed remarkable restraint, 450 bombs and mostly structures. Right? Amazing. It's always harder being the good guy.
Okay, and comments are back on LinkedIn. Thank God.
Beautiful.
So I'm very grateful for that. Nathan says Brits and Americans felt bad about sending Jewish refugees back to Germany's in the 1930s. So I feel a good story at the end of the war with bad planning. So it was a feel-good story at the end of the war with bad planning. I mean, I don't know. I think I don't want to get into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yeah.
I don't know that any one person has a solution for this. Peace typically takes generations. You got to get rid of all the blood that fought. And unfortunately, there's still some fighting going on. So
comments are streaming in, though. This is great. So, David, thank you. No surprise, Hamas will downplay the damage, of course. Truth will eventually come out, but that's what this show's about today, right? And with notification to general public before bombing. I know, that's right. The knock-knock bombs, exactly, Matt. So look.
The phone calls. I don't know if you've seen the YouTube videos where they're calling the building superintendents and they're saying, like the AP building, the building that they bombed, where AP and Al Jazeera were, that also happened to be the headquarters of the intelligence for Hamas. Like AP, the Associated Press, is sharing a building with a State Department designated terror organization. And then they cry, oh, well, they destroyed our offices in Gaza. And you're like, hey.
I know.
Come on now.
Look at your best buddy there.
Right. But I'm dying to see the AP reporter walking into a building with a Hamas fighter there with like an AK-47 and an RPG and going like, hey, Muhammad, hey, Gerald, it's good that you're here, man. What are you going to talk about today? How are you going to, diss Israel today in your stories? So, but what it does is it plays into something I think that's really greater than all of that stuff. the deception that was used there. But to me, I want to go back again. We tend to stray sometimes, and one of the things I want to do is keep us focused.
This is good. We'll
Right.
guide us in the audience, my friends. Just tell us where you want to go. We'll keep taking the comments.
So one of the things that I really that was an eye-opening moment for me, and I didn't want to believe it, was when that was successful, and then in piecing the stuff together, understanding that one tweet from a blue check mark became something trending that brought about the action of an entire terrorist organization to do something. Now, this time, this was for good, right? Depending on what side of the ball you're on, right? If you're a pro-Palestinian, you go, this deception killed many terrorists. Evil, right? Yeah. But imagine when this power is used for something completely different. When it mobilizes 300 people to attack a neighbor, or when it mobilizes countries against countries, or communities against other communities. So what happens when one blue check mark says something that's completely not? We've seen this narrative play in time and time and time again, and really get mainstream play. And so I'm looking at this and going, how do we rein in this technology? How do we rein in this disinformation? How do we rein in the idea of not everything that's put out there is correct? And I'll pull up comments here, and we'll have this discussion.
Yeah, let's get some comments. So Nathan's saying build Las Vegas in the Sinai Desert. Agreed. It would be the city of sin in the Sinai Desert right now. It would seem like a city of heaven. All right, go.
I kind of have a biblical challenge with that one. The Sinai Desert is where, we just celebrated Shavuot in Judaism, which was when God gave the Jews the 10 Commandments, right?
And then an atheist like me comes along and goes, Vegas in the desert.
Right. Vegas, where God gave us the 10 Commandments. Don't covet thy neighbor's wife while I'm at the casino coveting everyone's wife.
So Matt, thank you. Disinformation is an entire part of war and always has been. You're right. It is much faster now with cloud speed. Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it is. But that's the thing, right? So let's hone in on that for a second. How do we take technology? And really ensure that we start to identify disinformation? And I don't know that I have an answer for it, by the way.
Well, the answer is there needs to be, unfortunately, a system of punishment for people who spread lies. So all of these so-called fact-checking, journalists and news outlets who saw the little blue tweet and said, "Hey, let's go." So there needs to be a consequence to that. Right? If you're spreading information which impacts, the way people vote, the way we engage with our neighbors, the way we understand our healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So surely we can start with something that is the most egregious, obvious lie and say, hey, you get held accountable to that. And if you hold the big press organizations accountable, the editors are going to start fact-checking these so-called reporters that are, anonymous sources. We should no more anonymous sources. That's another one, right? Anonymous sources should go away. I think that would be a good start. It won't be a cure. We got some comments though. Glad to hear that. Oh yeah. Don't do this again because we're not able to do it again. What? That's Shlomo's. You might want to add to that one, Shlomo. But I don't have the reference for that. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. I'm trying to. If you screen bomb in an airport.
Yeah, right, Matt. That's right. Exactly. That's the point, right? You say something that will influence the political sphere or a human's life. There is accountability to be had with it. Yeah. Free. Nathan's saying, give free donuts for participation. Yeah. That's about all we'll give to these journalists nowadays. And
it's hard to impute punishment when the disinformation comes from divisions within one's government. So here's the deal, though. Political ideology is not disinformation, right? If I'm of a political party or stand for some sort of political thing and I believe one thing, just because I don't agree with them doesn't make it disinformation. Disinformation is saying that Joe Biden, like, to me, like, lies is someone trying to tell me that Joe Biden's with us. Like, the guy's 100%, his brain's functioning at high capacity. Like, the guy called the Coast Guard class today dull, right? Yeah. So, that to me is and the media trying to play it off like, the guy's is all that. That to me is disinformation. I'm more concerned with disinformation when it comes to one against thy neighbor. See, politicians have always been liars, right? Kiss the baby, take the candy, right? So we know that. I don't know what kind of behavior we expect from people who want to go into public service because they want power. They don't want to empower change.
Right. They want power themselves. Exactly. Right. The motivation's all wrong there. Yeah, let's get some more comments there. This is a sort of digital watermark that can hold people accountable. Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think with the editors, we start right there at the big publishing companies. And I think Project Veritas has really brought this out in the last few years, right? So Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, isn't it? Yeah, James O'Keefe's outfit. They are constantly trying to push this into the courts. And I think that's where we're going to save it, right? Is in the Department of Justice. Matt's saying, yep, to a comment that David made. And Homer said, about the same level of integrity of journalism, yes, we would get from Homer Simpson compared to a few characters that are out there. Right.
Yeah. One-on-one identity online. Yeah. I mean, so I think if there was more, here's the thing though, you've got to have something that declares disinformation, right? And the problem with disinformation is it's very you and I can look at a story and I can say it's disinformation, Eddie, and you can tell me, no, James, it's the truth, right? No, it's real. It's a fact. It's I've seen it because the internet is so filled with so much information, but because there's freedom of speech, my concern here is I don't know that what's the right move with this. Because if you limit speech, right, then you're taking away the First Amendment. At that point, at some point or another, no one will have freedom of speech. Right. But at the same time, how do we take technology and build it to where if I write a disinformation statement, people can say, like, how they do it with the COVID-19 stuff. If you post anything on COVID, they say COVID is so and so and so and so.
Right, yeah. So what you want, the watermark comment was an interesting one because that you need to create accountability. Now I suppose we already have it. Like, do you remember that time AOC, right? One of my local crazies here in the New York area. She did a photo op when Trump was in office, and they were going after him for putting children in cages on the board.
She went to an empty parking lot, and
she put on this white suit. Yeah, exactly. So now, luckily, we actually have a record of that because it's on the internet. It was her tweet. Maybe she went to take it down afterwards, but people will screen cap it. So we get kind of a record. But it does get buried, right? It does get pushed down to, it's down there somewhere. So what you almost need is some kind of watermark so that when people leave that digital trail, there is the bad moments like that photo op, the complete BS of, what AOC was pulling off there, is somehow attached to the current things they're saying, unless they offer attractions, apologies, financial retribution, whatever it might be. So you almost want to be able to have the digital footprint and trail of information, things that they're putting out there in one view so that we can understand these people in context. 80% of the stuff they say are lies. 20% isn't. Now I'm not going to believe the 20%, something like that.
All right, this is our good friend John Dela Cruz here.
Beautiful.
And John always has some very intricate ways of looking at things. It seems to me that there's a lot of lemmings out there. Should it be partly tech and perhaps holding people who are misinforming the lemmings? I feel it kind of goes back to David's comments on removing critical thinking from education thoughts. So Eddie, you want to tackle this first, or would you like me to go?
No, definitely. You're absolutely right, John. And it's people are. I'm a little harsh. I say sheeple, right? Lemmings, sheeple, same thing. You want to make sure that the people who are misleading the lemmings, when it comes to, I suppose what we need to do is we need to have, like, if people are being harmed, if a consequence to society is happening, and even not just harmed as a consequence of things like an election, right, of politicians with misinformation out there. So when it comes to this category of information, that's when we need to have the accountability string. And I think that accountability string needs to show up in a sort of a one-page view of people's lives so we can actually see, because what's mind-blowing to me is the amount of garbage that some politicians can throw out there and then yet still kind of scrub their record and continue to go out there. Even our current president, we've known this guy for 50 years. We know he's a liar, right? We know he's a deceiver. He started his first presidential campaign as a liar and got booted off the campaign trail as a liar, lying about the university he went to. And yet we're still in this place where today he's being held up in this last campaign as, oh, this guy. And so if we had a chronology, if there was an organization that provided well, look at the last 48 years of this guy's career, 80% of the stuff he says are lies, so we probably are not going to believe the rest of the stuff he's saying, it would give us context. So I think context is probably the thing that we need technology to help us with.
So I'm going to take this to a different route because we focus on politicians a lot. I want to focus on the individuals. We as individuals are lazy human beings. Very few of us work hard. Elon Musk said something a few weeks ago, I think it was earlier this month, that really resonated with me. I saw it was a tweet. I'm not able to verify if this was true or not, but everyone's been attributing this to Elon Musk. So if I'm wrong here, guys, please correct me. I don't take it personal. I know I'm never always 100% right. I'm about 99% right, and then I'm like 1% wrong, right? but
this is what we all say to our spouses. Go on.
But so Elon Musk said, people are dogging me because I'm rich, but I work 7 days a week, 20 hours a day to be this successful, and people tell me that I'm lucky, right? And there's an aspect to that where people look at what Elon Musk is doing and they go, well, that's great. He's like people like us, we look at Elon Musk and we go, Elon Musk is freaking brilliant, man. He's the Albert Einstein of our generation, right? He's the Steve Jobs of our generation. He's the guy who's changing things. He's going to put people in orbit. He's going to make things that we thought may not be possible until maybe 2100, maybe ready in 2030, like in our lifetime. Like Eddie, you and I could at one point in our lifetime, right, board a rocket to take a trip to space and go around the world, see the world from up top and come back down just mere hours later. Like I'm flying to New York and you're flying to Atlanta, right? So people look at that, and I think one of the things we lack today is personal agency and accountability over the information we take, process, and say. And social media, why I don't like Twitter, why I think that if there's one company I wish ill will for is Twitter, because I think Twitter is the bathroom wall of the internet. Yeah. When you go to the toilet in a club or in a really, like, there's all kinds of stuff on the wall. You're like, you see swastikas and people's phone numbers and someone's name with all kinds of stuff on it. That to me is Twitter, right? But bringing that behavior out to a place where everyone is accountable to it and then holding that platform and giving people merit there is the problem with this. And this is where we don't need technology to help us with context. What we need technology to do is give people personal agency over what they put out there. Meaning when you put stuff out there, right, and you put stuff out there that is intentionally deceiving, then there should be consequences to that. Those consequences should be legal. Meaning if you put something out against me and you're clearly lying, right? I should have legal recourse to go after you. Meaning I think we should establish a third court system in America that's called the internet court. And the internet court should be a Zoom ran court with judges. And if you post something against me that is clearly false, that you have no way to back it up, I should be able to see you, and the court should have recourse, like taking away your social media for a month, making you pay me a monetary fine if I've suffered monetary damage.
It's really interesting, James.
right?
Really
Because when people think of consequences from that aspect, so if the government isn't going to solve this, but a people like when our forefathers set up the U.S. criminal justice system, and you get to be judged by a jury of your peers, that is a selection you get to make if you're ever accused of a crime in America. So why not do the same with internet? Create a jury of peers who look at things, who are impartial to it, and are able to achieve a specific verdict for, like, imagine that the retraction times would all of a sudden have to be clearly and legally accountable for it. So they post a story that's clearly false, the headline resonates, causes you damage, Eddie, you're able to sue the retraction times. And if you guys don't know what the retraction time is, I call it the retraction times, the New York Times. The New York Times posts more retractions than stories. That is an honest to God truth.
Is that actually the case? There's more.
They post more retractions than stories. On an average story, they post 3 corrections, meaning 3 retractions to the original story.
Yeah, and no one reads the retractions. That's the
they put them in. The way the internet allows, the way it's allowed to go in is they do that. Project Veritas has done an amazing job highlighting this. You guys should all go check it out. I want to get to more comments here. Go ahead, Eddie, all yours.
So Matt says, don't limit speech just to identify a human that can be executed, tied immeasurably to the source of disinformation. Right, exactly, Matt. Let's keep rolling a few more. Nathan's saying you should be the same model and recourse as driver's licenses attached to a person and country. Yeah, and I think that would really help with the new courts, the court of Azar that's coming up here. All right. And Paul's saying, how do you handle QAnon who can get people to create their own lies? Yeah, well,
conspiracy theories have been around for ages. I'm sorry to cut you off there, Eddie.
No, it's all right. Yeah, go on.
But conspiracies have been around for as long as people could read, write, or speak.
And if you make the established press be more reputable, then people will start to ignore the QAnons, right? They'll start to I think the retraction times, because of the fact they retract so much, people are like, well, I'm not going to believe those guys anymore. So what's this QAnon thing?
But they do. The thing is the New York Times is still, the New York Retraction Times is still a reputable newspaper for people, even though it's not for me. Like, I don't even go to their website. I won't even give them a click. Stop giving these people clicks. Stop it. Stop it. Don't give them clicks. They go broke. It's that simple. Paul says maybe there should be an intelligence bar before you're allowed to post on the internet to keep the shuffle away. I disagree with that. I get that it's sense of humor, Paul, but it's something different. Matt Lee says agency indeed. Paul says for a good time, call Jack Dorsey.
We'll try and get him on the show.
Yeah. Darciso refuses to come on any of my shows to have a debate. And I challenge her to come on my show and have a debate with me over their privacy and security policy at Twitter and what they allow to go out there. I think that she would be doing it. And then David talks about Nick Sandmann against the Washington Post. And if you guys remember, he not only went against the Washington Post, he got money from CNN. I think the Nick Sandmann, his kids, his grandkids, and his great-grandkids are all set for life thanks to the Washington Post, CNN, New York Times.
What was the story with Nick again? That's right.
Nick Sandmann was when these kids were with the hat, and the guy was like, and he was smirking, and everyone went on and said he's a racist, and it's white privilege and white supremacy and all that good stuff. Crazy. And it turned out to be completely false. That the guy walked up to them, he saw them, they were touring DC on their class trip and whatnot. So
right.
So there's that aspect to it, which is
Nick settled a suit against them.
He sued Washington Post, he sued CNN, he sued CBS, NBC.
That's awesome.
And all of them settled. All of them paid him multi-million-dollar stuff. I think from the stuff I've heard, he's gone anywhere in the range of $100 to $500 million from all of those different organizations.
Wow.
for the reputation, because what they proved was he's young enough to where if he tries to, he couldn't get into college because of what they did for him. Right. So they ruined his future.
Right. And now he can pay for a college or buy a college.
I think he should go and he should buy CNN with CNN's own money. At this point, CNN's dirt cheap. Yeah, he got hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions he got, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars that he got.
Well, good. That's a start, right? So that is, punitive.
It's business. They expense it. It's part of business for them.
So, okay. So we were saying a little earlier in the show then, if there needs to be a financial consequence to these people being, let's say, media conglomerates at this point, who put false information out there. But if this is just expense, then that's not good enough. Right. So back to your comment on let the people to figure it out for the people and have some kind of people's internet court, right? I like the idea of taking people's social privileges away as a consequence for spreading false information. That's kind of interesting. And you said a few moments ago too that most people are lazy. It's like, sure, yeah, let's say that. The problem with that is we're getting down to the crux of it. It's not about race. It's not about, it's about the haves and the have-nots. So if you think of the socioeconomic hierarchy as a pyramid, right? You've got a few people at the top that have most of the money, and you've got stack up most people at the bottom who don't have most of the money. Now, that's just normal in every society. Humanity has not been able to figure out a way to solve that problem. Right? Meritocracy leads to that, and meritocracy seems to be the only or fairest of all the systems out there that we've come up with. So we have this. Now the problem is when society does it stacks too high, where people at the very top, that's right, you get the width of the bottom of the pyramid coming out, you've got too many people at the bottom, that's when war takes place and society topples. So government's role is to attempt to try and get this pyramid kind of working in an okay fashion, because you're never going to not have the Elon Musks who, yeah, certainly born with a really high IQ, I get that, but also worked his ass off to get to where he is today, moved from South Africa to America to put people in outer space. Okay, so of course he's going to stack up at the top. But when too many people or too few people have all of the wealth, and there's not enough people, and there's so many people at the bottom who don't have enough of the wealth, that's when we topple over. So what we should have then is some kind of system which includes, I don't know, getting people to contribute to fixing the misinformation that's out there. So if you say something stupid, because let's say you are stupid and you're doing these things, well, how can we get people to engage in action that undoes their lies? Because that would make them productive citizens to society.
So we're almost out of time for the show. I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
That just flew by. Oh,
next week, we're going to debate. And here's what I want to do next week. If you want to be part of this debate, please message me or message Eddie. I want to bring you on video on the show. Okay? That's the deal. I want to talk about the court of honest internet.
Cool.
Could we solve misinformation and disinformation by having a court of honest internet? Right. And removing all protections against media companies and platforms, and establishing an independent body, no law enforcement, because if it's law enforcement, it becomes political. But doing it by the people, for the people, like our forefathers saw it, adding another amendment to our Constitution, the court of honest internet.
And I would love to prep the dialogue for next week by, let's create a post. So James or I will create a post. We'll tag it with the court of honest internet, and let's start contributing to it now in thought, right? So let's start putting in some comments to it, and then come next week, tell us the person that wants to be on the show to get on the show for next week. We'll give you all the instructions on DM. That's a great idea, James. I think that's lovely. Fantastic. And Paul's saying the Azar courts, exactly.
No, please don't call it after. No. This is for this. I don't want my name anywhere near this thing. Like, this is like, don't turn me into a church. Whatever you do.
Paul definitely wants to do that to you.
Yeah, I know. I love Paul, and Paul does want to do that. I absolutely get it. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. But no, this is the idea of, could we create something by the people, for the people, that really does solve this and holds people accountable, because the court does have punitive measures to take against an organization, whether it be financial, I'm talking in the civil aspect here, not the criminal, right? Again, a civil internet court judged by jury of peers, where if someone says something that's against you, your organization, your company, that's clearly false, you could take quick and swift action by filing a complaint online, getting a court case, and appearing in front of a judge. Not even in person, online, right through like a Zoom or a WebEx.
Right.
And a judge can listen to that proof, look at the thing, and you can be judged either by a judge or by a jury. And the jury would be made up of, a court of public opinion. A bunch of people would watch the entire hearing. They could vote on it. It could be like a 2-hour window for people to vote, and as many people could vote as humanly possible, as long as they authenticate all kinds. I don't want to go through it now. I want to save it for next week's show. If you guys like this topic, reach out to me privately, or Eddie privately on LinkedIn, James J. Azar, or Edwin Eddie Doyle on LinkedIn. Message us there. We'll get you in. We will send you a link to join us right here on the show. So you're not commenting, you're talking, you're part of the conversation. I can have up to 10 people on the show with us. So I want to get as many people as we can and have this debate and see if we can create a sort of movement around this, or at least bring a different solution to a problem, because I don't think government can solve this, and I don't think regulation can solve this. I think the only way you cancel culture is by making it so that when you post something against me that clearly hurts me, I can take you to court for it. And the cost of going to court isn't complex.
Right, exactly. I'm looking up a quote here as we, that's right. Margaret Mead quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So, ladies and gentlemen, come change the world next week. There.
Folks, tomorrow morning, The Other Side of Cyber with my awesome co-host, JJ. If you're going to virtual RSA this year, whatever it is, I haven't attended one session, to be honest. I've been so busy. But JJ does have a learning lab on Friday. Please go check it out. Tune in tomorrow morning for The Other Side of Cyber. We'll be live for 30 minutes on here, but then we'll be the entire time on Clubhouse. I think The Other Side of Cyber is going to become more and more of a Clubhouse show, but we'll be on for about 30 minutes right here on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So tune into that 9 a.m. practitioner brief tomorrow morning. Eddie and I have some news around the practitioner brief for real soon, so you guys are going to want to check it out as well. I love Eddie. Eddie's in my DNA now, right? So Eddie and I got some stuff coming your way as well. So tomorrow's practitioner brief will wrap up this week as well, so tune in to that. And then CISO Talk episode just dropped on the CISO Talk. My panel with Sam Phillips, Paul Farley of NCR, Sam Phillips of Wells Fargo, Ken Foster of Fiserv, and Gautam Vyas of FIS Global. We did a panel on April 27th at the Cyber FinTech event. I took that panel, which you guys are going to absolutely love. It's available right now on the CISO Talk podcast. In audio only, video will be up next week. So you guys want to check that out as well. And all the awesome RSA content I've got there too. So go check it out, subscribe, share, like the show, contact us, be part of the internet, the court of the internet, the way to maybe make the internet honest again, at least in the US, at least within our own country. If we hold people accountable, we might be able to win this after all. That's it for us here. Last words, Eddie. Take us away, buddy.
No, that's it. I'll give you that Margaret Mead quote again. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. It's greatly appreciated.
Cheers, guys.